Perfect. Thanks.
Oh, well, look at there. All right. Well, let's go ahead and jump in. Let's start by saying hello to everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. This session is called Communications and the Federal Climate Infrastructure Package. So as you just heard, the session is being recorded and Carrie Lyons from ClearPoint Communications is taking some notes. Everybody say hi to Carrie. Hi, Carrie. For those that I haven't met, my name is Tracy Sabetta, and I'm with Initiative Consulting in Columbus, Ohio. I represent both the National Wildlife Federation and Moms Clean Air Force on ReImagine Appalachia, and I'm also on the ReImagine Advisory Board. So we're hoping to take some time today to talk about the concept of sort of winning the win. And you've probably heard that phrase more than once if you do any kind of communication for your group or your organization. But if not, essentially it means owning or celebrating a win that you have participated in achieving. And even if it wasn't your win, you can still have a role in amplifying or promoting that victory. And when it comes to winning the win around the federal infrastructure climate package, a lot of it comes down to effective storytelling. So today I'm hoping that we can spend some time together brainstorming on new and creative tactics for sharing those stories, but also take some time to discuss the strategy behind sharing those stories. Why do we need to win the win? Why in Appalachia specifically? Who are our targets? Who are our best messengers? Finally, because this is a strategy summit designed to inform ReImagine Appalachia's plans moving forward, how can we work together throughout the region, and what resources are we missing in order to be successful? So unlike this morning, though this is not a panel presentation, but an opportunity to hear directly from you with experiences, success stories, and stories of things that didn't work. Sometimes we learn more from those as well. And I am really hopeful that everyone is going to feel comfortable to participate and share their ideas. We have all tried different things, and I will tell you there is not a single soul in this session who doesn't have something to learn from others today. So you don't even have to know all of the details of a project that you are celebrating, but you can tell us the strategy that you use to help celebrate it. So to kind of kick off today, I want to open the floor to some stories of advice for those looking to win the win in their communities. We have a lot of people who have been doing some storytelling projects, collecting those stories of success. I will just say we have Beth Michaeljohn, who's doing storytelling work for the Energy Foundation in Pennsylvania, and John Newrohr, a partner at Clearpoint Communications, who've been gracious enough to agree to share a few of their thoughts about strategy behind sharing our stories to get us started and to get your wheels turning. So like I said, this is not just a listening session. We really want to hear from you with questions, with ideas. And if you have a story of success to share from your organization, it'd be great if it's about the infrastructure package, but we can learn from other stories of success as well, even if it's not about a specific infrastructure win. So with that, I am going to open up the floor. Beth, do you mind maybe talking a little bit about the work you're doing in Pennsylvania?
Definitely. Thanks for inviting me on. So yeah, is everyone familiar with the Energy Foundation storytelling campaign for the most part? Are you no? Okay. So the Energy Foundation is working with ReImagine. What we're doing is really trying to take a non-policy look at ways that the IRA is impacting local communities. In the work that I'm doing, I'm going out and trying to identify where those stories, where certain communities can offer stories to us, interview, community members, talk to small business owners, talk to employees, union employees at certain organizations, and make sure that their stories get heard. One, put that content together in a bunch of different ways that we can talk about. And then just make sure that, again, that story doesn't just go out once and fizzle. How can we amplify content? How can we just make sure it, remains top of mind for people? Each of these stories that we're working on over time, certainly for the next 18 months, we want to kind of tell this larger story through all of them coming together and just really celebrating the benefits to local communities that the IRA is bringing and make sure people know about them. So that's kind of the overarching goal.
Fantastic. And can you just maybe tell briefly, what are you hearing? Like when you're out there and you're listening to folks, what do they have to say?
So some of the first stories that that currently I'm working on right now, job apprenticeship programs really seem to be rising towards the top. I think it's partly due to the fact that some of the IRA funds haven't quite hit certain areas yet, but there is so much optimism in different industries where they're really, they're motivated now because of this funding to start hiring, start training. We were at a Solar States, if anyone's familiar, out in Philadelphia, an organization that does solar installation. They have an entire program right now where they're training solar installers. It's not new, but with IRA funding, they really, raised their hand and like, we need to make the most of this opportunity. And they're going all in. They've expanded their training program, bought a facility. We did a really cool video shoot with them last week. The video should be out later next month, which I'm excited about. But that's kind of it's not just that these programs in the job apprenticeship, example are popping up, but there's just a lot of energy and excitement about them. So that's really fueling, the work that we're doing. Is there's so much excitement. So it's how can we capture that and, make sure that we get it out. So I would say of all the things, that's probably the area where we're seeing the most traction right now. EVs is right there behind it. So, a lot of excitement about that too. Actually, John and I were out at the Energy Innovation Center a couple of months ago. There's a lot of new technology that's going to boost that industry. So it's not just the manufacturers, but a lot of the component manufacturers as well that are getting in, and they're just seeing their businesses really boost as a result of the funding. So yeah, right now I'd say it's at the business level, and then obviously as those are implemented, I expect to tell more of the homeowner consumer stories, this time next year.
Sure. Oh, that's great. That is great to hear. And John, since she made mention of you and the work that you've done with her, talk a little bit about why winning the win is so important. Like, what is the strategy behind this? It's not just to get, check a box to get another article in your local newspaper, but why is it so important that we are sharing these stories?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, Tracy. I think, what we need to do by lifting up these stories is, it's really kind of a hearts and minds campaign, right? We need to change the way that folks in our community think about the possibilities with these investments, because I think, number one, in Appalachian communities, there is naturally and understandably a lot of apprehension when it comes to what the government's motivations are when they are making policy decisions, spending our tax dollars. That is a very warranted apprehension in those communities. They've been left behind so often that I think it's natural for folks in those communities to think there's no way that these investments are going to change my community for the better. There's no way that these investments are going to result in opportunities for folks like me and my family and the other people in my community that I care about. That these dollars aren't going to end up reshaping our community in a good way, and frankly aren't going to end up in our pockets. So we have to lift up these stories and hope people will be open to listening to the reality that there's a lot of effort being made by policymakers right now to make sure that the investments end up in those communities where the people are most apprehensive to, that kind of potential help and assistance. And one of the challenges we had Carrie and I were on with a group of advocates at the ReImagine Your Community cohort. It's community advocates from Appalachian communities who are trying to, bring people together, trying to find ways to tell these stories. They're not sort of by trade. You know, some of them are clergy, some of them are, you know, just parents in the community, but they've taken an interest and volunteered and wanted to learn more. And we talked with them last week about using earned media opportunities to tell stories. The problem is that I think, you know, Carrie, I don't remember, there were about a dozen folks on, and only maybe one or two of them could identify functioning local media outlets that covered anything happening in their communities anymore, because, you know, local media has been decimated. So one of the things that I think is really important is for us to think creatively about the vehicles that we use to tell these stories, actually get to those people who need to hear about these really positive opportunities and things that are happening with IRA dollars. And that might mean that we're thinking very differently about, you know, earned media is not an opportunity, right? What we need to do is we need to think about, you know, what people call owned media, but basically like making you being your own media, right? Thinking about blogs, thinking about creating audio and video content that it can be shareable on social media, thinking about, you know, what feels like old school, but like build an email list and, you know, put together short emails, newsletters, whatever you want to call it, but to get these stories directly to people in the communities that don't have a local newspaper for you to pitch a reporter to write a story about a thing, you know? And, you know, we have to find these other avenues. Oh, also, by the way, telling these stories, finding in-person opportunities to tell these stories. On that call we had last week, there were folks that were talking about identifying events at churches, community events, fairs, places where they can go. Can they set up a booth and like actually hand out material to talk about these stories? Can they go to, you know, community gatherings or church gatherings and put together a quick video where they're, you know, it doesn't have to be flashy and fancy, but you interviewed people who are, you know, benefiting from some of these investments or job training programs or whatever those look like. We have to think creatively in Appalachia about how we get those stories out there. And, you know, Beth and folks like her are so expert at identifying the stories that are going to break through. And that's a really challenging thing too, that we should talk about. How do you find these stories? But also thinking creatively about how we're going to get them in front of people. It's a really difficult task in our communities.
Absolutely. And those are some great suggestions. Just sort of by a show of hands, and for those of you who are off camera, you can either put it in the chat or use the function to raise your hand. How many of you are currently working in the realm of identifying storytellers and, you know, trying to get these stories in front of either local news outlets or the groups that John was just talking about, that are you're actually out there doing this? That's great. So for those of you who are, what's working? What have you noticed that is actually cutting through the noise, or what's not working? Like I said before, either one of them, I think there's a lot we can learn from those.
Hi, this is Katie Lee here. I work with the Energy Foundation on a few different projects, including Power Clean Future Ohio and Roots Initiative that's really focused on communications with rural communities. And one of the interesting things that we did to reach out to rural communities is worked with a company called Drive Agency. They do micro-influencer work. So they would go into like Facebook and Nextdoor to identify, you know, the kind of leading voices in those communities and do paid partnerships with them to talk about different IRA resources. They ended up making a Reinvest in the Midwest brand so that people had a place to land. And their findings were just extremely interesting. The sort of people-based stories were the most resonant across the board, whereas there was a lot of pushback to plain climate or EV messaging without that local connection.
Yep, that is a great example. I know in some of the work that we've done here in Ohio as well, just to kind of change the narrative around clean energy a little bit without advocating for a specific policy or a specific vote, because we wanted to try to shift away from some of the opposition around clean energy so that when there were opportunities for votes or we're asking people to take action, we've already provided some of that education and information. And one thing that we found some success with was creating an online influencer list where we were targeting, especially around Facebook. And I know that there are problems with all of the social media platforms right now, but some of them are still somewhat useful. And creating those influencer lists so that we are targeting certain decision makers or certain geographic locations with Facebook ads so that we know that they're seeing them, we know that they're getting this information, and it's not just put out to the general public, because for a very small budget, you can hit the people that you need to have see them. I mean, truly for $25, sometimes depending on the size of your region, you can make sure that they are seeing a certain article or a certain message multiple times. So I think that has been one that we've been kind of playing around with that has worked pretty well. Shannon?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm with National Wildlife Federation and excited to be here with you all today. I just really appreciating all the comments and ideas that have already been shared, and would like to echo all of them. And we're trying to do many of those ourselves. And we haven't yet really penetrated the micro-influencer approach. And I love that. I'm going to talk with some folks about that. Just wanted to share really briefly, and then also see if I might be able to horn in a question also, because I would love other thoughts on this. So we also think that video has been a real way to go for us lately in trying to break through all the noise, and also it helps make something shareable on social media, of course. And so we're kind of experimenting with different lengths of video and styles, where some are sort of person on the street, it's like you suggested, somebody, I forget who was, talking to actual people related to the topic or in the field or whatever, to really bring something to life and showing the actual, climate related solution in the shot too, or in the video. So whether it's a turbine, we did an offshore wind tour and made a video related to that, or kind of natural solutions related to a flooding project, project in Pennsylvania, to help make these topics more concrete, more real for people, because some of them are really arcane. I mean, maybe people know what a solar panel and turbine are by now, but beyond that, maybe not so much. So feeling that really helps. And then also we're doing some videos that are more like illustration or educational videos with the kind of the animation style, and trying to make it really engaging, but constantly needing to tweak and refine and make our language more lay friendly. It's so easy to just get too wonky really fast. One thing that my question for folks is, how have you all felt is the best way to approach the substance of the matter, or the meat of the matter, the actual sort of even mildly technical aspect of something, whether it's the policy or whether it's the actual climate solution or something like that? Or is it really just about the people story? I know that we're really emphasizing how much it really is about people and kind of end result, but part of me can't help but feel like, well, we have to do some level of, education as well about what we're talking about, right? Or is that should I just be leaving that behind? Curious for thoughts.
We'll open that up for folks.
I can comment on that. I think it is a blend of both, but the percentage of the education versus the personal story, I think, is just a call on, your part as to what's going to resonate the most. And not every video has to try to accomplish everything. Maybe it's a series of content where you begin to make that personal connection. Once you have a bit of trust with your audience, then you come in with the educational component. There's this kind of, you guys have probably heard this, in a couple of leadership professionals will talk how, we make decisions emotionally and then we back it up with logic. So making that emotional connection before you even go into facts and figures, and try to make your case to someone can be far more effective than just one video or whatever medium you choose, listing a bunch of data points and saying, see, this is why this makes sense. So I always go to that emotional tug before getting any deeper. One way that we're doing that, and this was the ReImagine team that helped us, this video is also in editing. We did are working on an abandoned mine lands video, very technical topic if you want to dig into it. But the story is being told documentary style from the perspective of the speaker. So, you're connecting with him and understanding his connection to that region before he starts getting into some of the finer points as to what these dollars will really do for the region and everything downstream. So I hope that helps. It's just I would encourage you not to think about how do we do everything with one video, but how do we really put a story together that can string a bunch of different pieces of content together.
Yep.
Real quick, can I?
Sure, go ahead.
I wholeheartedly agree, and you lead with the personal, and I think that if you don't lead with the personal, you limit your potential audience for a piece of content significantly. I mean, like that is a very small potential audience that you're gonna be able to deliver that piece of content to, unless you lead with the personal. So couldn't agree more. Sorry, Alexis, I see your hand up. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to also agree, but just share that I'm a program manager of a climate change communications and network building project in Pennsylvania. It's called the Climate and Rural Systems Partnership. I'm based out of the Museum of Natural History in Pittsburgh. But we found the same thing, like in engaging in dialogue around climate change. One of the most important things is to make the story or the conversation or whatever it is locally relevant, or just relevant to the lived experience of whoever you're talking to, and allow space for that emotional component to come out. And John, I think you said earlier about something about like it's a hearts and minds campaign. And I completely agree with that hearts component, but I would even add, like, not just leading with the emotional piece, but probably bookending both sides of the conversation or the story with this emotional piece. And I can share this in the chat, but there was a report that was recently released by the Yale program on climate change communication and a marketing firm called Potential Energy about like the most effective message framings to engage people and change behavior. And it's like these very simple phrases like later is too late, and we're doing this because we're protecting what we love. And you can tailor that to who you're talking to, but I think it just says something that it's these simple messages that can be repeated consistently across organizations or across regions that can kind of create a more unified messaging campaign than something that's a little bit. Sometimes the messaging can get too specialized that the overall kind of goal or heart of it can be lost sometimes. So I'll put that in the chat.
That would be great. Thank you. I think something else that we're facing right now is, for some of us, at least I can speak primarily for Ohio. Clean energy is a growing industry, but it's not a familiar industry. I mean, we don't have a lot of wind farms in Ohio. We don't have a lot of visible solar panels. So when we're talking about the need to build clean energy, for a lot of people, it's a nebulous concept, which is what has allowed the misinformation campaign to be so successful in a lot of our states, because it's very easy for someone to come and tell you all of the bad things that will happen if you construct a solar array, because you've never seen a successful one. So, we can just say, no, that won't happen. But, it's much easier for gloom and doom to win the day. So something that we've been really trying is not just the personal, but the tangible. Trying to find tangible examples, which is proving more difficult, because with these infrastructure dollars coming in, it's going to take a while before we have tangible examples. In fact, one thing we always say is that if we could just have one legislator with a brother-in-law who was working on a solar panel, we'd be all set, because then they've seen it, they know it gave someone that they care about a job. and they wouldn't possibly be involved in something that wasn't good for our community or for our state. So that has been something that I think is a struggle for a lot of places where you don't always have or already have clean energy development. Is finding those examples, finding those experts who can talk about it. And I think once you do, that is something to really wrap your hands around and see, how much you can spread that message. John, that you came off mute there for a second?
Yeah, well, this is, Beth can attest to this, the everyday struggle to find. I mean, one of the reasons for that is that the dollars have been slow to get out the door. And so, we've been stuck with sometimes trying to tell a story about a thing that hypothetically is happening in a year, or we have a press release about the money that's going to come in 6 months, and then they start the project and it'll be done in 2 years. And so that's really challenging, because I think, in the end, that plays into people's natural apprehension and, to any of this being real and government dollars, and it's all sort of nebulous. And so we're trying to tell stories about things that are slightly less nebulous than just good ideas. But, this came up in that meeting we had with those community advocates last week, which, these are people that are volunteering their time. They have lives and families and other jobs, most of them. And so they're saying, how are we going to find these? I mean, unless it is my brother-in-law who is, actually getting this job, how do we find those stories? Jotted down a couple of ideas, things to think about in trying to track down these stories. One is engaging as much as possible and as much as people have capacity to do with things like this webinar, other sessions people offer. These things that you are not aware of, often it's just somebody mentions it on a webinar like this, or you are getting connected with other folks that are working in the same area as you and you had no idea, and that they have some ideas and maybe you have the capacity to help them tell those stories. The other thing is that it sounds simple, but set up Google search alerts, because often, for your local area and IRA or investments or clean energy projects, because a lot of times we find this stuff because there's a press release that went out, whether it's the federal government agency sends out a press release and it's not flagged for us for some reason, but we can find it in a Google search, or the local companies that are getting the investments, they'll often put out press releases. It may or may not get covered in local outlets if you have local outlets, but you can find those press releases online, and sometimes that leads to storytelling opportunities. The other one is going back to that idea of thinking creatively about how we tell these stories once we have them. You also get these stories by engaging people in real life, like actual human beings, face to face, and going to these community events, or going to church gatherings and fairs and things like that. But it might seem annoying, but let people know in your community that you are looking for this stuff. So that when they hear about something, the business that's getting some federal funding, you may have no idea, but they can remember, oh yeah, I had that conversation with Beth, and she's working on storytelling about federal investments. I'll shoot her a text message or something. Let people in your community know, maybe in an annoying way, that you're looking for these stories, and sort of deputize them to help you track these stories down. I don't know if Beth or others have thoughts on how you're doing that constant searching for the story opportunities.
Yeah, there's actually something we're working on now that is exactly kind of what you're talking about. So thinking, and it kind of the background is to get in front of audiences that are hard to reach. And I was thinking about this when you said about, just local media can be a challenge. It's looking at a community influencer from two perspectives. One, they can actually help you put the story together and get you some really great stories that maybe aren't getting already told. But they can also be a voice to help you get that story out once it's created. So one of the tactics we're taking is finding community influencers, real people who have an audience just based on what they do. The next that we're going to be working with is a pastor who is just very dedicated to clean energy. He's putting solar panels on his church's roof like next month, maybe March. And he's connected, in those channels, and he's going to be telling his, all of his congregation about this. And he's also connected to other churches. So, he's really excited not only to help us put that story together, but then share it. So that's a strategy that we are going to try to continue to replicate. So yeah, I think, John, that's maybe one way to think about, individuals. They can serve more than one purpose when it comes to helping you amplify content. Another example, I think, which ties into this challenge. When I started working with Energy Foundation back in the summer, that was kind of the big thing. Like, how are we going to tell stories about things that haven't happened yet? The first story we put together was a community influencer in Pittsburgh. His name is Dr. Cisneros. He's a pediatrician at the Pittsburgh Hospital. He's passionate about not just this topic, but he treats a lot of children with asthma. And we put a story together on air quality. So what we talked about wasn't the benefits of these investments improving air quality, was kind of the second half of the story. The first part was, we opened that article, we wrote it, so we have more control, of course, but the opening of that article was this kind of visualization of and kind of audio influences as to what it would sound like when you walk through a hospital hearing children coughing. And that was, his entree into this article. That's what he hears every day. So we're telling the very thing that we're trying to eliminate is the story, the piece of the story that we're telling first, so that we can then make the case for why are these investments going to impact, in our case, children's lives. So we kind of went about it in a roundabout way because that's the story we could tell now. And it was really powerful. So
I would be interested to hear from some others about things that you have already tried, either that have been successful in telling a story or setting the stage for a story to come. Don't be shy. You've tried something.
I just put this in the chat, but there's a USDA funding database for different IRA and infrastructure law programs that go through USDA, where you can look up, if you know the name of the program, you can look up all of the funding recipients. So I haven't found a similarly user-friendly source for some of the other agencies. Also have not looked in a little while, but we used this last summer to identify recipients of REAP grants, partly because that program's been around for a while, so we could talk about the fact that projects had already gone on for a few years. People could talk about the success they'd seen, and then we could talk about how the funding was increased through the IRA. So that was a little bit easier because we already had those tangible projects to point to, but we could pick projects in different legislative districts and that sort of thing by going through like this huge database. So recommend that approach, but it was like old-fashioned reporting, cold calling to make those connections.
Absolutely. That is a great tip. Thank you. I know that actually brings up, I think, another question is the difference between, picking our targets and also picking our messengers at the same time. People joke with me that my headstone is going to just say she knew her audience, because I just walk around constantly reminding people that you have to know your audience before you put anything out there, because you're never going to want to speak to, at least these days, the entire population. The general public is becoming a point where the general public is no longer an audience, because there are so many differences within the general public. It's so expensive to try to reach the general public, and you're only speaking to a certain portion. That's all that's hearing you, even if you are speaking to the general public. So it seems, at least we have found, that we can be far more successful if we really know our audience and we pick our targets as to who we want to talk to, and then figure out who the right messengers are to speak to that particular audience. And Molly, I think farmers, we've noticed, at least in Ohio, farmers right now, our message testing has shown, our experience has shown, they are the messengers. They are the ones that if farmers are talking about clean energy and climate action and moving forward with, dollars coming in from infrastructure through the REAP grants, we have farmers who are putting solar panels on their grain silos, on the top of their barns. I mean, when they're saying this is something that we want to do and we see the benefits of it, people will listen. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're always voting the right way, but we can at least get an audience if farmers are the ones who are delivering the message. And I'd be interested to hear if anybody else is noticing that, or maybe noticing a different messenger who really seems to resonate.
I mean, I will say we did some focus groups of in Western PA, Appalachian coal community focus groups about a year and a half ago, and public health as an issue to sort of lead with is still very effective for basically all audiences, including Appalachia sort of coal community type audiences. And families, moms, people talking about their health issues, and how, sort of investments in clean energy can move us towards a situation where some of that could be abated. There was no apprehension to that kind of messaging. We were doing these focus groups about something slightly different, which gets in the weeds, but it was about the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative and Pennsylvania entering into that cap and invest system. So, but we were just sort of testing messages to see what might move folks in those communities. It's a similar kind of situation because a lot of the investments that would be used in that cap and invest program in Pennsylvania would be workforce development, job retraining programs in communities, in those coal communities. But the public health messaging works even better than that. And I think part of that is people's apprehension to, oh yeah, like you're actually going to deliver in our communities these new sustainable jobs that you keep talking about. People don't believe that, but they do see the health impacts. They've seen generations and generations of health impacts in those kinds of communities. So, families from those communities telling stories about the health impacts was the most impactful sort of messaging opportunity and messenger opportunity that we saw.
That's great. Who has another example? A good messenger. Is there a messenger you're hoping to get? You're trying to build relationships with? Yeah.
I'll just share that, like in the networks that we work with across Western PA, it's over time, the majority of those who are participating, the organizations are environmental educators. And so they have this particular reach into student and adult groups. And I don't really work directly with the IRA or federal funding and stories related to that. So I can't really comment on that, but I guess what I've seen, and maybe just more broadly, is those who have built trust with their audiences and their communities. Like those are the storytellers that need to get out the message, not me at the museum. It's Mountain Watershed Association in Southwestern PA who's been building relationships over time with their communities on industry and public health and climate change. Those are the orgs that people will listen to when they are telling and sharing these positive stories as well. So I think it just depends. It's a little hard, but I think I'll also agree with the farmer message. It seems like that's just a group that everyone has trust in because our food is important and who grows our food matters.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. Who else? Any other good messengers? So one thing that I can talk about that helped us a little bit, we are in Ohio working on a utility scale solar campaign at the same time that we're also doing community solar, which I will tell you is a lot more popular than utility scale solar. But one of the things that we've been doing in these local communities is we work with an entity that does grassroots canvassing. And they're going door to door. But instead of waiting till someone opens the door and then telling them what they should think, it's a listening session. It's more of a deep canvassing session where we're listening to people in the communities where these utility scale solar conversations are happening, and finding out what do they know about solar development, what do they think, what have they heard, what is in their minds already, and do they identify themselves as a solar supporter or someone who needs more information or someone who does not want to see the development in their region. And what that has allowed us to do is to build these local groups on the ground who are the messengers to their local elected officials. So rather than, the National Wildlife Federation or NRDC going into a township trustee meeting and saying solar development is fantastic, you've got Bob from down the road is saying, I could see that there's someday I might want to lease part of my land to solar development to have, a little diversify my income a little bit or protect my farm, or I just think clean energy is the way to go. And that is going to be so much more effective than me going in and telling them that solar is great. Is someone who's a voter of theirs can tell them that solar is great. That person can also write a letter to the editor of their local papers. They can speak at a hearing. It's the local voice that's going to get picked up. There's a newspaper we work with in one community. There's an editor and a reporter, and that is it at this local newspaper. And they rely on press releases coming in. If you say, as John mentioned, sometimes if you send them a press release, they will print it verbatim. Here is what is happening. Here's what we're announcing. But they will go to these township trustees meetings. They will go to these community meetings and they will talk to the person who lives and works in that community and tell their story well before they will share anything that I send to them. So I think really localizing this voice seems to be making, the biggest difference. And I guess we're not really surprised by that, but it was so much easier to find people who were willing to talk to us at the door. Some of them have even agreed to do videos shot at the door. That we would say, how do you feel about solar development? We tried this on a constitutional amendment campaign that had nothing to do with clean energy back in August, but just, how do you feel about this issue? We were shocked at how willing people are to tell their perspectives on video if you just give them the floor. And those have been so helpful to us on, we do it over social media. We can share them in member email blasts. And that then eventually gets the attention of reporters who want to know more about what is happening. So it's sort of layering your approach. So you're using all of the different tools at your disposal. But I'd be interested, I know when Shannon was here, she was talking a little bit about video, but has anybody else tried, video recording people telling their stories or using that as part of the video? I know, Beth, you touched on that a little bit.
Yeah, that was what we're finding success with that is when we're doing these job apprenticeship programs and speaking to the actual students who can, like in the example of the solar. I mean, these guys are amazing. They were telling us, this job is, I'm going to get paid more than I did before, which means my family is going to, have all of these improvements they were listing. It was really powerful. So yeah, for sure.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Any other examples of working with video? Okay, so we've got, I think, about 15 minutes left here. And what I want to make sure that we do touch on is, because we're going to be using some of this information to inform the development of the strategic plan for ReImagine in 2024, is what do you want to see when it comes to communicating and telling the story and really using the tools that we've talked about today through ReImagine? What resources can ReImagine offer to you, whether that be from a regional approach or technical tools to help you more effectively tell your stories? What do you feel is missing? So would it be, just to try to jog some ideas here, would it be helpful to do communications trainings through ReImagine, so that, I know we've offered them in the past, but I think it's been a little while. Maybe instead of just the overarching communications training, would it be helpful to have a social media training or using video to tell your story, kind of like a much more tailored kind of training? Is that something that you would attend and that you think people would benefit from?
I think especially some of those specialized tactics surrounding IRA would be really helpful. I know the general one was nice, but more of the specifics or like one-offs of how to like engage in that way would be really great.
That sounds good. Is there anything in particular that you would like to know more about? I know I'm throwing all these questions saying, figure it out off the top of your head. Is there any training you've attended recently that you found really beneficial that we could offer to others?
To your last question, I'm not sure if I feel like I would want to talk to the organizers on my team to understand like if the people they work with would attend something like this. So this is
Sure.
not fully fleshed out, but I'm thinking about like the folks in county commissions and maybe some business partners and that who we're working with to apply for funds, a training for them to be able to tell their story, and something like because for those advocates there's something in it for them too about like they're trying to get those funds, so they're trying to get publicity to their projects and whatnot. So if we could make it something where they feel like they're benefiting, they're not just helping us tell a story, we're helping them tell their story so they can get the funds, they can get attention on the project.
Sure.
There could be interest in that.
Yep, I think that would be great. So we talk a lot about, if you look at the other panels and the other breakout sessions where we're talking about, kind of reimagining your communities or bringing money into your communities. Yesterday, I attended a session called Make What in Appalachia, where it was essentially a brainstorming session on what we can make. If we keep talking about bringing manufacturing into Appalachia, what are we manufacturing? What do we feel like we can really do that's not being done, or what can we do better and bigger? If we had community benefit agreements, if we had, specific people to help us write these grants, what is it that we would make if we got there? And there was a lot of conversation about hemp was really popular. Let me just tell you, you have no idea how popular the idea of hemp is in Appalachia. But so that was a big part of the conversation. And then there was also a lot of talk about battery storage, and really just making sure, transportation, what about electric vehicles? So there was, a lot of different ideas that were thrown out there, but, I'm just thinking every time we go to one of these sessions, we should be thinking to ourselves, and we promote this how? And we tell this story how? That it should always be a component to everything we're doing, is how do we let people know we're doing it? Because they may want to be helpful. They may have ideas. We may be able to work together. So I'm trying to figure out a way to make sure that that is a piece of every conversation that we have. It's whether it's the last piece or not, but it's just that piece of, and we're going to let people know about this great thing, how, and through what channels. So that is something I think I would like to suggest, to ReImagine, that every conversation we have, every webinar, because let's face it, ReImagine does some great webinars. They do more webinars than any organization I've ever come across in my entire life, but they do them all really well, and they're really well attended. So if that's going to be the case, how do we make sure that this is a piece of all of those conversations? So what else? What else do we need to be doing as a region to tell our stories?
Well, I just want to emphasize Phoebe's comment in the chat about
I just saw that.
countering misinformation in an election year, and I think that will be really important. It's a pretty pivotal year for elections in our region and around the country in general. And then just another thought I had would be, I think it could be helpful to workshop like how you would frame the same message to different audiences.
Yes.
Because I don't like the jobs and infrastructure framing is important for some groups, but not all groups. And like we talked about earlier, the public health message can be more impactful or appealing to what people love and care about and how we protect that. That's what inspires behavior change or voting, maybe more so than consistency around the jobs message. So I think, but like a workshop where we can kind of strategize together and that's interactive could be an interesting and fun way to do it.
Yeah, that is a great idea. I worked years ago when the climate action campaign was in Ohio. I did some work with them. One of my favorite sessions when we would all come together for national meetings was the hour and a half that they would allocate for a best practice session, where it was just you raise your hand, somebody would recognize you, and you talked about something really great that you did. Or you could ask a question, you know, how do I get past this hurdle? How do I overcome this obstacle? There was no structure to it. There was no allotted time frame. It was just a, you know, what really worked well for you this year? And, you know, you tried to get everybody to speak before you did a second round, but oh my gosh, I just remember taking all of these notes and writing down all of these ideas. And it's just, I think once you get people with different experiences together and you just kind of open it up, it takes a minute, you know, as I think we all see in these sessions, it takes a minute to get people talking. But once they do, I mean, there's a wealth of information among our groups. And I think it would be a great opportunity to let people come together and share it.
Tracy, this is a little bit of a little bit off on it's a little bit of a side, getting us sidetracked maybe, but so
that's all right, sidetrack.
I'll be fast. So one tool that I found has been really helpful and I think can be utilized in us thinking about how we're framing stories for different audiences. There's a tool that's called Grow Progress. I don't know if anyone has used Grow Progress before, but Grow Progress is a tool where you can you basically buy credits, and it's a way of doing quick message research. So you can test text, you can text video, short video, you can text graphics against each other. So let's say you had 2 or 3 different cuts of a video that were slightly different framing, or, you know, started from a different perspective or whatever. And you were curious how that might resonate with different audiences. You can load those into the system. You can very quickly do an online test and get back really helpful results that, you know, it's sort of a simple way of looking at crosstabs. It'll tell you audiences in these, you know, in this age group, this level of education, these parts of the state, if you do a statewide, you know, test reacted differently to, you know, video A, B, or C, right? It moved them in, you know, good or bad, you know, more favorably or more against the kind of the thing that you're trying to get at. You give that, you know, so basically audiences get either a placebo, which has nothing to do with anything you're doing, or one of the things you're testing, and then they're asked a question. So that question might be, you know, the federal government investments from the IRA are going to, you know, show real, you know, will improve the economic situation of my community or whatever. I don't know what that might be an example of a question. And you can see after they see each of those videos how they move on that question, and it can help you really say, okay, well, we have these 3 videos, for example, and young people really reacted positively to video A, whatever that framing might have been. But, you know, seniors in rural communities really reacted well to video C. So anyways, we can, and maybe this is a session that we do at some point, Tracy, to look at Grow Progress results. So it's called Grow Progress. And it's relatively inexpensive as these kinds of, you know, research tools go. You can do massive statewide tests, or you can test in very specific regions or demographics. You know, you can give them zip codes. So it's a very cool tool. I would suggest you check it out. As an example, we did a massive statewide test in Pennsylvania a couple weeks ago. It was 2,000 participants, like, which was, they told us, we don't recommend you don't need to do any more than that. It was the max of the max. I think it cost us $4,500 for the whole state. So
Huge.
you think about if you are honing in on specific geographic regions or specific demographics groups in specific regions, you know, you can really minimize the cost and get we got a 25-page PDF, and it's basically a roadmap. You know, scroll down, find seniors in the, you know, Western PA, and here's your answer. You know, this is what you go with. And you can see when it's counterproductive too, which is really helpful, that they react very negatively to certain things.
Yeah, we actually looked into that for something that we were doing, and I was shocked at how affordable it really was, especially if you only have a couple of questions. You know exactly who your audience is, and you can target in. I think there was one that we could target farmers in a certain county, and to answer, to get a question answered for like $250. Now, I mean, obviously the group we were talking to wanted us to do far more than that, but that was just the starting point. It's like, but you could do this and then, kind of build from there. So I think that's a great idea, John. I would love to see us talk about that a little more. Is that something that, would be of interest to those who are here? Find out a little bit more about that. So I guess in the couple minutes that we have left, that is, I guess, a question that I would have is, we talked about what kind of trainings would you want, but what are there questions that you have? Like, or are there things that you just wish you knew a little bit more about, whether it's communications related or not? I guess at this point, is there something that would help you that we can pass along to ReImagine that you would like to see included in this strategic plan? Are you more interested in clean energy development and community benefit agreements? Here we go. How can we focus on renewable energy versus hydrogen and fossil fuels? I don't know if you happen to see Amanda's comment in the during the panel today, is that ReImagine is not taking a position on, yes, definitely agnostic, because there's so many different points of view on hydrogen. As different organizations that belong to ReImagine are all over the place when it comes to hydrogen. But the one thing that I keep saying, and trying to get as many people to listen to me as possible, we're still going to have to address it. Even if we're not taking a position to endorse or to oppose, I think development of talking points around certain controversial topics like this could be very helpful to have to share. And we don't have to share them broadly. We don't have to make it something that we're doing all the time. But just if you don't necessarily want to engage on one side or the other of an issue, what can you say if you're asked, whether it be by a reporter or even somebody else in your coalition? Like, what are some talking points that we could use? Are there other issues like that would be helpful for you to have information on? And yes, I'm always happy to see any data that folks can bring. So Alexis, the ReImagine Appalachia website does have some of those links. There is a tracker on the website, a federal tracker for funding opportunities. I know that for sure. In fact, we actually did one webinar called Tracking the Trackers. And I think we have another one coming up, because there are so many trackers out there that, you can get lost just trying to figure out which tracker is the most effective. But yeah, I would highly recommend checking out the one that is currently on the website. It is a really good one. Policy developments, I'm not sure that that's really on the website, but there is a federal policy call that ReImagine hosts every other Tuesday at 1 o'clock that is open to anybody who is interested in joining. If you think that's something that you'd like, we can make sure that we send out the information about that. Yes, helping us find the stories we're telling. That, a story, and maybe Beth, you can help with advice on this one, sort of a storytelling, oh, she has to leave. A storytelling database.
I do have to leave for a 1:30 call. But yes, a storytelling database. I mean, we're kind of putting together those toolkits that I mentioned that. And so that's a part of it, is just making sure that we're sharing resources, so that if I have, a story that I'm hoping to put together, I have others that can maybe look and kind of, help come up with those ideas. Is that the question as far as the database?
That sounds great. What I was thinking of that would be awesome too was just like making sure that when y'all are putting out great stories, that there's a way for me to me or someone on my team to find them and retweet. And sometimes that happens organically, but just like we're such a big network that just being able to amplify each other and make sure the good work we're getting gets out there.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. And that is the toolkit that I mentioned. So that I'm hoping to have like towards the end of the quarter. And that's exactly the point is so there's two things that I'm hoping to accomplish. One, just give you guys the content that we've already put together and help us amplify it. But two, like some templates. So if I'm putting together a story on broadband, that's a statewide issue. So if I have a contact that I'm interviewing, you could remove those quotes and, put someone local in your region in there or in a certain county you're targeting, and be able to tell the same story, but again, localize it because we've talked about how important local is. So there's a couple of different things that I think the toolkit will first and foremost be content that we can provide to you to amplify. And then second, following that, just how can we help each other create good content without reinventing, stories every single time.
That's great.
All right, but I do have to run, but thank you everyone so much.
Oh, Beth, thank you so much for sharing your experience.
Thanks,
I really
Beth.
appreciate it.
We appreciate it.
Thank you all too. Bye-bye.
So it looks like our notice that we're going to be thrown back into the general session any minute now. But before we do, does anybody have any parting comments? All right, well, then I will take this opportunity to thank you all. Thank you, John, for sharing your expertise. Thank you to everybody who shared their experiences and their stories and their ideas. Carrie, thank you for taking notes and for helping us make sure that we recorded all of this, because there would be no point to learning everything if we didn't have a way to record it so that we could go back and look at it. But I would just encourage any of you who have ideas, if you have questions, if all of a sudden you're thinking, I'd really love to know more about this would help me share our stories, please reach out. Please don't ever hesitate to not contact. Even if you can't find me, you can always find Annie or Dana with ReImagine, and they can help you get in touch with us. And we would love to make sure that we're giving you all of the resources and tools necessary to do the best job that you can, because that's going to be the best thing for the region that we can do. So anything that we can offer to be helpful, please don't ever hesitate to ask or suggest, or just throw them our way.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Tracy.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we're doing all of our thanks and they're not throwing us back over into the main session. And now we're just going to have that awkward moment of all staring at each other in these little boxes.